Hi guys, and welcome to episode 6 of On the DL. Dakota,
Len, and we're here to show you the practical approach.
and today we have our first ever guest, which I'm super pumped about.
So exciting.
I've but I've stalked Jaxson for a while now. He's a part of, the transgender community, and we kind of want to know his story through, competitive powerlifting and his everyday life.
Can we just quickly clear up, Jaxson? How would you prefer to be referred to in terms of pronouns? Do you like his, him, da-da-da-da? Is there anything in particular that you would prefer us not to call you?
My pronouns are he, him, which is totally fine.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah. Beautiful. Now I want to kind of go through how I first met Jaxson. We've covered this, I think it was 2014. It was the last Pro Raw at PTC HQ. And it was my first one that I've seen, and I think I was just a baby powerlifter at that stage, and for some reason, he just stood out. I think it's just the way he handled himself, he really stood out to me, and then I just kind of followed his journey for, the next, 6 years?
You got a bit addicted, obviously. Yeah.
Just a little bit. Through kind of, watching him on Instagram and chatting to him, randomly back and forth, I've really learnt a lot. That's mainly why I wanted to have him on today, to kind of talk the last few years of his life.
It's really exciting because obviously, there's a lot of stuff in the news at the moment about transgender athletes, and it's all very controversial, but I don't think most of us know much about the transgender community full stop, let alone the transgender community in sports. Dak and I are far from authorities on the topic.
No.
So when we were asked to do this, we were really hesitant at first, because it's like, well, two white girls who've never experienced any form of discrimination in their lives talking about such a topic. It's kind of like we did not want to step come out of step.
Yes, 100%.
So really, we reached out to Jaxson because we want to make sure that we've got a really balanced approach to this, and we want to make everyone very well aware that we know we're not an authority on this topic. So we thought we'd talk to somebody who can broaden our experience as well.
Yeah.
So we really are appreciative that you've come on, Jaxson, so thank you again. And I guess we've got a little bit of a run sheet here today because there's some topics we really wanted to cover. So I was intrigued, as a pre-transition competitive athlete, how did you feel about transitioning both in life in general and in sports?
Hey, first, thanks so much for having me on here first, mostly because there's so much negativity going around at the moment about trans people in sports, and even in powerlifting, and historically it's been pretty rough as well. So I just want to applaud both of you for reaching out to someone from the community who, rather than sort of just like doing your own research or trying to sort of assume that you might be able to have a conversation about this without any input from the trans community. So it's just like, it's a huge step forward for anyone to do that. So thanks so much for that. So pre-transition, what I understood of your question was, what was it like pre-transition as a competitive powerlifter? And then what kind of like approach did I have to transitioning from that space? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. So it's got to have been an interesting process.
I fell in love with powerlifting when I was 26. I got really bored in the gym as a gym bunny, and I found a great little community in Sydney. And what I loved about powerlifting the most was that it really didn't feel like it mattered where anyone sort of came from, what their background was like, what they did as work or anything like that. Everyone just wanted to sort of get together and nerd out on biomechanics and lifting. And so it really, what I was able to focus on when I went to the gym was like people talking about movement and strength and like different accessories and sort of like breaking down things, problem solving and things like that. And it's probably the first time that I've been in a community where I felt sort of seen just for something that I do, not for like what I represented. At the time, pre-transition, I was very, very seriously in denial about who I was. I thought I could make it work as a female in my life. I thought I could make it work that way. And I was really, my world became very, very small in that space. So there were only certain places I could operate in without feeling like overwhelming anxiety or becoming so burnt out, felt depressed. And those places were my place of work, my home, and my powerlifting gym. So
that's awesome.
Powerlifting for me pre-transition was super important for those reasons. Also, super important because it gave me another way to connect to my body that wasn't just pain and difficulty and everything that I didn't like about myself and everything that was really triggering for me. So it gave me a space where I could have a conversation with my body and be in my body without feeling like panicked or feeling emotional in any kind of way, apart from like, nervous about lifting heavy weights, which seems like a lot easier than like what I was dealing with at the time, which is crazy. So as a competitive athlete, I was just thrown into it. So the coach that I had at the gym I was in Sydney was like, everyone here competes. So you just got to do it. And because I'd been a gym bunny and I had no idea what I was doing at the gym, I just made it my goal to like tricep dip the whole stack, like bicep curl the whole stack, and like quarter it like 80 kilos. So I somehow built enough upper body strength to be, I think my first ever coaching session, I benched like 77.5 kilos for a single and I weighed about 62 kilos as a female. And so he was like, well, we're going to take you to nationals. Like, even though I could not squat or deadlift for anything, so bad.
Bench only all the way.
I'm pretty sure my first deadlift I ever recorded was like a Romanian deadlift sumo.
That's brilliant. Love it.
Yeah, it didn't get much better at my first comp, but
oh, that is terrific.
Yeah. So in a way, when I was 26, I was very much in denial. I didn't come out to myself until I was 27, and then I did nothing about it until I was 29. And basically powerlifting was something that sort of allowed me to move through my life or do something in my life that one sort of felt like I was kind of moving towards something because I was like training and, I was getting stronger and I felt really masculine in my body in those moments. And competing was easy for me. It didn't really bother me that much until I started sort of like competing at Pro Raw, which felt like a lot of pressure.
It's kind of huge. 1,000+ people watching you will do that to you.
Yeah, exactly. And then I started getting like more serious about squatting properly and deadlifting properly and stuff like that. So I put a lot of pressure on myself after that. But competing as female, I loved it. I mean, I really did. I just did love it. Like the community was amazing. Women coming together in that group, collaborating, supporting each other. It was such a great space to be in. I always just felt really supported and celebrated as a female, even just as a person.
Yeah, that's what makes it so great.
It's a hugely empowering sport for most women. Most women that come into powerlifting definitely walk away feeling like
a lot more confident.
Yeah, that's it. They've stepped up a notch in their life one way or another.
Yeah.
Now, Jaxson, during your transition, were you a competitive athlete? So were you competing during your transition?
Yeah, so by the time I was medically transitioning, which was mid-2016, I had been to 3 Pro Raw comps, which I loved it. I was doing really well. My lifts finally were sort of coming together. I think I was somewhere in the top 10 of the under 60 kilo females in Australia, but I knew that 2016 Pro Raw 7, I think. I knew it was going to be my last Pro Raw competition as a female and potentially my last Pro Raw competition ever. because I knew that transitioning into a male, the competition, well, firstly, if they were going to allow me to compete. Secondly, if I knew that how competitive, the male division is. And I think I totaled 400 kilos at my last Pro Raw in 2016. And I knew I literally had to find some way to put a stack an extra 200 kilos on top of that somehow.
So, it's a decent gain.
Yeah. And I think that was it. I was like, that's going to be an immense task. At the time, I was like, but I had such a desire, and I still do, to compete as a male at Pro Raw again. I just think it would be just so super momentous and really positive message from my community and the powerlifting community as well.
Oh, yeah.
Mostly because there are so many people that do support me and support trans people in sports. And it'd just be fab to have someone sort of at that level competing.
Yeah.
Even, anyone doing that would be great.
Yeah, it'd be unreal.
It's just a leader, right? We need people in that position.
Yeah, we should see something. Visibility is everything to a minority. Seeing people that are like you succeeding or being visible in some way, open for who they are, is so incredibly empowering, and it has such a massive effect on the mental health and that the community's own sort of standards for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's definitely I knew I had the privilege to do that when I started transitioning, because I was just so supported in so many ways, and it's just a huge goal of mine.
It's amazing that you felt so supported. On that topic, post-transition, when you were moving across into a different category, did you feel supported by the powerlifting community? How was your experience in general?
Yeah, so in general, it was really positive. I started transitioning mid-2016, and I decided I had the same coach. So I'm coached by Luke Shakespeare, and he was my coach since 2015. He got me to my last Pro Raw. I told him everything that I was planning to do, and he was just supportive in that. He was like, I'll just train you like always, and we'll just have constant feedback and see how you go. So we decided to sort of take a little break to let the testosterone sort of work through my body. If it brought anything up physically that I might need to work through or rehab, do that. But obviously there's a real sensitivity, especially in the first 6 months of testosterone therapy, where you're moving from an estrogen dominant person into a testosterone dominant person. And that took me about 8 months to get there. And, just saturating my body with testosterone and letting it sort of go through those changes, letting all the cellular changes happen and the hormonal changes happen and the mental changes happen. I still, we just sort of focused on doing conditioning and things like that. And then I competed in October I did a quit bench for a while. So I somehow make use of the gains I was getting. And I did bench 40 kilos more than I had at Pro Raw, my last Pro Raw.
That's huge.
With a shirt on.
Yeah. God.
Yeah. I got a good taste of the gains that were to come, that's for sure. But overall, my experience was good. When I enrolled in my first comp as a male, so all I did was I changed my membership at GPC to male. I changed my weight class because I stacked on 20 kilos in the first 6 months.
Yep.
And then I just enrolled. I enrolled as bench only in a push-pull comp. What would you call it? Yeah, so GPC, endorsed that comp. I don't know. It wasn't a novice comp. And the coach who was running it called me and said, I actually don't know if I'm allowed to sort of let you do this. So I think I need to put it through the federation first. And I was kind of oh God, okay, sure. To me, it was there's really no difference. And, and this is just where I'm going. I can't compete as female. That'd be crazy, right?
Yeah.
And, because my whole identity changed, within that, even just the first few moments of medical transition.
And that
so for me, it was a total shift.
That would have been a no-win for you anyway, because you would have had so much flack for the whole situation, advantageous transitioning, it would have just been a lose-lose situation if you were to continue in the female category. Yeah, that's...
Totally. I wouldn't have been able to do it. I would have been like, it goes against everything for me to then have competed with the women.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, it's just the category was totally inappropriate for me. Like, one, because it is not my identity.
Yeah.
Second, I would clearly have an advantage. Like, I'm totally saturated with male hormones.
Yeah.
I'm not going to walk into a female comp and just start sort of lifting against them. Like, it doesn't make any sense, you know?
That's an interesting...
And so I was...
Sorry, but I was just going to say that's a really interesting point, though, because I guess people would view that differently as well, wouldn't they? So that's your ethical or your internal feelings led you down that pathway. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see whether or not all transgender athletes in a similar situation would have made the same decision. Or whether or not they felt an ethical need to make that decision. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, I'm just going to speak in general terms for the community. Going through the kind of cognitive dissonance it takes to realize that you are actually of a gender that is completely different to how you were assigned at birth, how you were raised, what society expects of you, how everyone's already viewing you. Like, going through that, it changes you as a person, and there's no way around that. So I couldn't go against my own nature and compete with a female in a female category just based off of that. It's not even my own ethics. I mean, I know there are some trans athletes that are desperate to compete, and desperate to compete in their own category, even if they don't meet the criteria. And that's problematic, and that's why we have ethical guidelines around that people need to follow. But yeah, like, it's like saying, like, oh, Dakota, like, you're registered in this horse race and you're running with all these horses, so just make it work, you know? It really is.
That is brilliant.
It's just so unnatural, you know? Like,
I can run, all right? I can run.
I've seen her. She can run. But that's actually, it's a nice way to put it, though. Yeah. Because, let's
I don't know. It's just so foreign to think that would be something that someone would do. Like, you wouldn't, it's not part of your sport to cheat or, like, take a competitive advantage that's so obvious. And try and work your way. It's not a win. If you win, it's not a win, you know, like, it just doesn't work. It's problematic, that's for sure.
To go through that process.
But that brings me to the story. Like, the guy was like, no, I don't know what to do. And I was like feeling pretty downtrodden about it. I was like, shit, like, I might not be able to compete as a male. This is, like, really devastating. Because, you know, I was just in love with powerlifting. And then I actually got a call from the president of the Fed like 10 minutes later, and he said, you know, we're just a bunch of old guys. We don't know what we're doing. Can we assign you as our, like, diversity officer? And we'll get you, if you can just write up a set of guidelines for transgender people competing in powerlifting in our federation. Cool. We'll go by your guidelines. You know, you just let us know what's right, and we'll do
awesome. That's got to be pretty much the best response.
Jaw, like, on my own lap, couldn't believe what I was hearing.
That's an insanely great response.
Yeah.
Like, I guess
they can't write them. They don't know.
Well, and exactly the same as what Dak and I were saying at the start. Like, we're far from authorities on this topic because we've never experienced any of it.
How can you set the rules that you aren't confident in?
And you don't understand any of the other aspects. Like, when we first started talking about doing this, I was like, well, I can give an opinion on the hormonal side of things because I've studied medical science and I understand a bit about the medical side of transitioning. But even then, the psychological components that weigh in, I could have no clue idea whatsoever and what sort of toll that would take. Like,
probably can't see me. I'm off camera. Hi guys, it's Sam from Pro Raw. But how interesting is it that Jaxson gets thrust into being a leader in his community because he's put his hand up or he's transitioned. So he never asked to be to wear the cape for his community, but
he's wearing it well. He's wearing it well.
So you're forced in this leadership position, and kudos to you for being brave and showing that. So that's awesome.
That's it.
Thanks. Yeah, it was just an amazing opportunity for me and for the trans community to have that. And I did a ton of research, and I found that there were some governing bodies that were kind of the example to follow. So I followed their example, and we came up with some great guidelines with also great pretense. I just thought it was really important that trans athletes who are looking at GPC as a potential federation for them to lift in, I thought, I'm just going to pretense this with a positive kind of note. And so I think I wrote at the beginning of the guidelines, I wrote GPC as a federation recognises transgender athletes as competitive, strong athletes that have the right to be on the platform. And we fully support their engagement and participation in this federation. Please note the criteria. If you don't fit the criteria, please contact blah, 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 whatever. So
Jaxson,
we just kept it. I just wanted to keep it really open, welcoming, and then have space for dialogue as well. Look, and I was really blessed that I was able to do that. I did cop a little bit of resistance from some people, and that resistance is probably ongoing. But again, powerlifting does seem to have a baseline of respect on some level based off the sport. And so we were able to sort of come together over that at least. And then I had some really amazing allies come out, and we've done some really amazing work together since then for trans people in powerlifting. It's been pretty cool.
Jaxson, can you tell us where people might be able to access the guidelines?
Yeah, so the guidelines are in the GPC Federation rulebook. So you can download the document, Control F, and look up transgender guidelines.
Because you know what, even I don't know those guidelines, and we're sitting here chatting with you today. And
who reads the rule book? Who reads the rule book?
But it's true, and it's everyone wants to have an opinion on the topic, but no one actually knows anything about it. No one really knows that there is a regulatory system involved, right? Everyone. And
that has been. That's so good that you say that, because that has been the hardest part about this negative conversation that's going around about trans athletes, is that people are just throwing around these super derogatory, ill-informed comments that are going viral and damaging people like me, especially people like me who want to compete, or people like me who are too scared to come out, and they're seeing these negative commentary. And, these people aren't even looking up just basics. You can look up transgender guidelines in any sport on Google, in golf, in tennis, in, you can look up the Olympic guidelines, and there are guidelines for any sort of professional federation anywhere. And you can read up what it is that allows that person to compete. And so I don't understand how people can think that their opinion or their ill-informed, crappy, commentary even adds up to people who are in the field, in the ethical field, to write guidelines professionally for a sport.
Yeah.
I don't see how they can go against that. And that's been the most damaging part. And that's been the most draining part, because I'm just look this up, trying to get people to kind of see that they just need to do their own research rather than just barraging online at this really, really vulnerable community.
It's how can you talk about something or have an opinion on something and put that out there for the world to see when you don't understand any of it?
Yeah, and like we were saying before, not just lack of research, because there are some people who at least try and get educated, but the experience component, you just can't substitute for it, right? You just can't. I'm intrigued. This is just a random question from me, Jaxson. In terms of categories, right? Obviously, we've got the men's and women's categories. I have a friend who refers to herself as non-binary and doesn't want to be male or classified as male or female. just in your opinion, do you think that there should be a separate category, or do you think that it kind of has to stay as male and female from a competitive standpoint, like from a judging standpoint?
That's interesting.
Well, that's such a good question. Thanks so much. So what I just mentioned was, like, when I put out the guidelines, I got some really great allies on board and we did some really good work. And some of that really amazing work was that we've introduced an MX category. So we do male, female, and mix, or MX.
Okay.
And MX is for any athlete who either doesn't identify as male or female, identifies as non-binary, gender fluid, Z-Zim, Zaddy, whatever pronouns they're taking.
Okay.
And it gives athletes a space where they can compete in powerlifting under the same sort of guidelines, same rule books, with other people in a safe and supportive environment, and and still have the same opportunity to compete. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, but we've launched it in as part of some novice comps in Australia. I don't know if we can take it any further than that yet. Any changes to the foundations of a federation need to go through the global AGM and needs to be discussed, researched, put through like whatever professional thing they've got going on, and then sort of decided upon. So haven't quite made it that far. There are other global federations who have brought in an MX division for whatever reason. And so it's happening around the world.
Do you think
if anyone's watching this who do, like, if they do own a gym or they do coach anyone, any gym, anywhere, and they hold novice competitions, it'd be great to team up and to organise and talk about how to implement the MX division, because we did our first MX division at Burley Strength in Canberra, ACT, in 2018, and it was amazing. We had 11 MX trans and gender non-conforming athletes compete. And I tell you what, it was like,
there's not the numbers.
Makes me upset, makes me emotional thinking about it, because it was an incredible day.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So it's not like there's not the numbers there to fill out the category, because that was always my, I guess, lazy assumption, was the reason that it probably hasn't gone further is because there's not enough demand for it. But the demand's there. It's just getting it up that chain, I guess, that chain to the top, so that it can start becoming the normal, rather than becoming something that, just a scattered group of people are implementing.
Yeah.
It's like about, it's about, we've, how do I word this? It's like, we're here where there are athletes, non-binary, trans, gender non-conforming athletes everywhere, and we just haven't had the access or the opportunity to compete. Some of us, haven't had the access or opportunity to transition, and having spaces that literally flag, we love you, support you, come here, like, they will come. And that's like one of the things that I'm like really passionate about, is there are some really amazing athletes out there, some really incredible athletes that we don't know about, and we haven't had the chance or opportunity to see them grow or see what they can do, because they just don't have anywhere to go. Yeah. And so having this kind of platform, it's like evolutionary at this time. It's amazing.
That is, it's really interesting to hear that side of it, because, I guess, why do you think we're not more aware of transgender athletes in the sport, so that we can sort of start to push that support side of things? Like, I own a personal training studio. It's very small, and most of our clients don't compete. So from a competitive athletics perspective, but we would have absolutely no issue having members, like, we would be happy to be associated with the transgender community, but it's kind of never actually come up, because we've never had a transgender client want to train with us. As a nutritionist, I've worked with a number of transgender folk, but from a personal training perspective, we've just never had it come up. Is there a way that we can sort of show that we're supportive of the community?
That's a good one.
So that people know that they're welcome. Like, is there a platform or something where we can sort of say, hey, anyone's welcome?
Yeah, that's so awesome. I mean, there's so many reasons why gender non-conforming people are like invisible. Even though there's so many of us, there's so many reasons, and like we definitely can't go into them. The scope of this is like it's way out there, but there's so many levels of systemic oppression that make people, can put us in a position where we don't even have like the energy or the mental health capacity to train or like to join groups or like have access to proper work and healthcare and all that kind of stuff, to just like even be able to have the privilege of accessing a gym or like working on ourselves in that way. So there's different layers of that. And so you'll have people maybe with less of that who can do more and are more visible, and maybe a lot of people who just can't, they just don't have access for lots of those reasons. But I think like on the flip side, what we were talking about before, like creating gender-informed spaces is the key. So to create a gender-informed space, you need training on what gender is, what gender nonconformity is, what gender diversity is, what being a trans person is like, what that what that whole kind of discourse is about. And as you get to know and understand gender better, the little like nuances of the whole identity thing becomes very easy to understand. And then you can become more confident with it. That's about being gender informed as a therapist or as a coach or anything. If you want to make your space gender informed or gender welcoming, there's so many different things that you can do. I just opened a clinic, a healthcare clinic myself. And so we have on the front door the main kind of flags. You got the rainbow flag, the trans flag, we got the non-binary flag, we got the indigenous flag, just to signal to people that, this is a safe space. And we are unapologetically welcoming you here. And we don't give a shit, like, if there's anyone who doesn't like this or, hey, Howard, or anyone who has an issue with this, it doesn't matter. What's more important is that you have access to this space.
Hopefully that comes up on the video so that we can tell people why we're all
and
giggling.
Then like things like paperwork, asking people what their pronouns are, asking people what their names are, asking people what their what they identify as. So male, female, non-binary, gender non-conforming, other. You have these options for people, and then you yourself are confident. You've got your staff are trained. You're trained, and that just creates the energy that people need to walk into a space and be comfortable, even to be attracted to a space, right? Using things like putting in your bio on Instagram your own pronouns, even though you're cisgender maybe or whatever, putting your own pronouns in, saying that's a flag. I'm somewhat up and supportive on this kind of topic. So my pronouns are she, her. This is my gender identity. I identify as female, whatever. It's like you having your own gender conversation as well is very supportive.
That's a really good point, because we don't think of that. So, before this, I had a bit of an online chat with one of my friends who is non-binary, and she helped me, see, I've already done it. There you go. They helped me understand that even though my intentions might be one thing, the perception can be very, very different. And luckily, in my experience, people who I've put in those positions have known me well enough to know that my intentions are good, so it's never gone badly. But it's nice to get that reinforcement from people that you actually know and you can be comfortable making mistakes with, because you're not going to get it right first time every time. And I think that's the other thing. People are so scared to say anything.
Like it's I mean, you gotta work with that, right? Like even for me, like I'm a transgender man, and I always identified as male, and my pronouns are easy, he, him, even though I got misgendered for the first 2 years of my transition, even, you know, looking like this, I got misgendered. And I sometimes still get misgendered from people who knew me back then.
Yeah.
And it's just like where was I going with that? It's just like part of the process. But the less of it there is, the easier it is for people who are a little bit more vulnerable or a bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
And they're the people that we really need to support, because they're the ones that don't usually have access. They're the ones who shy away from programs and healthcare and things like that. I had a great experience. I had a hysterectomy in 2019, and I booked in with a great specialist here in Sydney. I went to her clinic. Her clinic was called Alana Healthcare for Women. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this might be a little bit tricky. But I went in and I went on my own. My partner couldn't come that day. I thought, I could take my partner. She's cisgender, female. And I was like, maybe, you know, she could be my shield. But I had to go on my own, and I sat down, started filling out the forms. And the forms were completely gender neutral, totally. And like, probably no one else would have noticed that, but I noticed it, and I went, oh. And I looked around, and, you know, there's just like blue and grey tones, no, like, you know, not hyper feminized or anything. The reception staff were really straightforward. They knew I was there for my own consult. They didn't say anything about it. They didn't misgender me. They're just straight to the point. And my surgeon was the same. She was like, so you have a uterus and it looks like this, and this is what I'm going to do with it. And I was like, so it makes a difference. Even for me, like, I'm like really chill about things, but having no like resistance at all to that process, I could tell the difference between when there is, I have a body tension, stress response that I just manage at the time. But when I'm in a space where it's like totally smooth and supported and totally like regular, that I was there, it's like I'm being taken care of. I can let go a bit. Yeah. It's a big difference.
Jaxson, can I ask, how far into your medical transition were you when you chose to have the hysterectomy?
How far in was I when I chose to have a hysterectomy?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I had a hysterectomy 3 years in.
Yeah.
So I started testosterone 2016. I had top surgery. So I had chest surgery, which is like basically a bilateral mastectomy with that sort of manscaping. And so that was 2017. And then 2019, I had a hysterectomy. And the hysterectomy was important to me. My transition is very unique to me. Yep. There's no one way. Everyone does different things. Some guys, they get their surgery done, they get the top surgery done first, they never take testosterone, you know. Yep. Some guys do testosterone 10 years, get top surgery, go off testosterone, and they're good. That's their transition. Some guys take tests, do the top surgery, do the hysterectomy, do the phalloplasty, or any other kind of bottom surgery or sex reassignment surgery. For me, that's where I'm heading. I'm heading towards phalloplasty sometime in the next 2 years, which is an extreme surgery. It's very intense. And hysterectomy is one step of that. But I also had a hysterectomy for other reasons as well. So it's just like, it's very unique, the journey.
Yeah, it's so unique. I'm just so intrigued by it all from the medical perspective as well.
So many things in the process, you know, so many steps and they're all different to everyone. You do them at different times. Like it's
because from my understanding, sometimes people will put off the hysterectomy because they're unsure what their feelings on having children, so on and so forth, and so they'll put that off because testosterone therapy is somewhat reversible to a degree depending on how long it's been followed. So I'm just super intrigued about it, so hopefully I'm not asking anything inappropriate, Jaxson. I'm very intrigued.
Look, it's okay to ask questions. For me especially, like, I'm totally open. I'm an open book, and you know by my Instagram that I'm very clear, happy to talk about anything. But like, there's a mutual respect here as well. Like, I'll tell you if it's not right,
please do.
Like, I'll give people options how to reframe the question.
That's it.
So that it's more appropriate. You know, we're all learning together. We're just at that phase in history where we can't expect a lot of each other. We have to learn together, and that's how we create like a community that is gender friendly.
And we want people to want to learn, right?
Yes.
We don't want people to be discouraged in learning just because they've made one mistake and had one bad experience. We want to.
I don't want to traumatize you in your own, because learning about transgender people is essentially learning about gender. And when we learn about gender, we learn about our own gender.
Yep.
So I'm not going to be like, shut it down. It's just not fair. I think everyone needs to learn. And this is great. This is a great platform for that too, because, people can sort of sneaky listen to what they're too scared to ask about or don't really want to know, don't really want to. Yeah, it's cool.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why we call ourselves the practical approach. We want to make it available to everyone. We want people to be less confused at the end of our videos rather than more confused. All right, I think there was one other little topic that we wanted to touch on. Dak, do you want to go over this one?
So there's one major topic, and then there's also one question that I just really wanted to cover personally. What's the most positive experience you've had post-transition? What's been the biggest, really just pure joy moment that you've had, if there is one?
In powerlifting?
In any aspect. Life, could be powerlifting. It's a big one.
She was really excited to ask you this, Jaxson. She mentioned it on the phone to me 3 days ago.
I think it's really common for people to ask, what are the negatives? What are your challenges? All the negatives. But I would love to cover the positive side of it, 100%.
For sure. It's so good to shift perspective over, because you're so right. So much of the conversation is around, and it's a really difficult time and people have a really hard time, but there is so much joy in this conversation and this journey that people are having all around us. People discovering themselves, having moments of self-realization, transformation. It's really amazing. And for me to think of the most positive thing that's brought the most joy is so hard to choose one.
Yeah, no.
You know what? You'll make Dak's day if you send her a list. You'll make Dak's day if you send her a list of the.
Send me a list.
A lot of them.
Okay. I'll do a powerlifting specific one. Okay. So I was right. Okay. Let me get this right. So when I started competing as male pretty much straight away, as soon as I started medically transitioning, I did my first bench only comp in October. I felt out of place, super out of place. Then I prepped for a 3-lift comp the following April, which was kind of my kind of entrance into the world as a trans male athlete. And I did really well, but I still felt like things weren't right, I still felt out of place. My coach was amazing. His friends were amazing. I just didn't feel like it was so grated, I just felt like I had to rush on the platform, rush off, And then a year later, I had top surgery and everything, and I was prepping for states, and I was so fucking nervous. I was so nervous for this competition. I knew I was going to put up some bigger numbers, squat over 200, deadlift over 200. I was probably going to put about 60 kilos on my total from the year prior. And I was I was just so nervous. I was gutted. I almost couldn't contain how ill I felt. And my coach was great. He's just guiding me. And I was pre my third squat I think I was going in for 215 for my third squat. And my coach is wrapping my knees, and I'm white. You know what it's like, panicking, big lump in my throat, doing my wrist wraps, just trying not to freak out. My brain's going like this. And this guy, and I was already feeling out of place, right? There's a big difference between competing with men and competing with women. Women, supportive, collaborative, they'll see you from the other side. They're like, you got this, they'll give you a hug, they'll hold you, hold your chest and stuff like that. Guys are just
it's so intense.
They're in their own head.
They're in their zone,
Yeah.
They're in their zone, and they're shit talking each other. They're talking each other down. They're walking all over each other. And I was just so constricted. I was so out of place. And I was just oh my God, and I'm wrapping my wrist wraps to get on the stage for squatting. And this guy like runs up to me. That he'd already out-squatted me. He's in the same weight class. So I was like super intimidated. He runs up to me and I'm like, oh, here we go. He's like, bro, I just saw your Instagram page, man. And I was like, in my head, I was like, fuck, I don't need this right now. Like, can you, like, I don't need, like, I'm cool to answer anything. He's like, no, like, you're so inspiring. Oh my God, I can't believe you're here. You're amazing. Like, and he's like, I've got his hand on my shoulder and he's holding my hand. He's like shaking it like, I'm so glad I met you. Like, go out there. He's like, kill it, man. Kill it. You deserve it. And I was like,
that is
and I did. I felt this shift inside me where I was like, holy shit. Like, it just like this shift, like, I shifted from like nervousness to just fully inspired to just go out and, you know, put my chest forward and just squat at my best. And like, that was a super cool moment for me. That was a really good moment for me.
That's amazing.
So did you get your third squat?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
It
was very easy. My coach was angry. He's like, you should, if you weren't so nervous, you could have gone 225 or something like that. I was like, whatever.
It's never good enough. It's never good enough.
That's brilliant. Oh, God.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Well, we had one last little thing to cover if you've got time, Jaxson.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Last but not least, do you have an opinion on what would constitute an unfair advantage in terms of muscular and strength development and hormonal influence with athletes who have transitioned?
Yeah, so like I've got my own. Okay, so we're at a space right now where we've got a little bit of research on it.
Yeah.
We have nearly zero athletes to go from.
Yeah.
Yep.
To judge or have an opinion about it. And we have a ton of ill-informed commentary about it. So, which is, you know, based off, which isn't like no one's fault. You know, it's based off of like the system of education is also quite oppressive. It's taught in a gender binary, right? So we're only going to see things in a certain way until they're challenged. So there is a powerlifter in the States. I think his name's called, I know his Instagram handle.
That's how we know everyone
Jordan,
these days.
Jordan_barbell, something like that. He's a great coach. He's over in the States, I think, or Canada. He did a really amazing synthesis, very practical, neutral synthesis of the current research, both biological, metabolic, psychological, all of those things on this strength, this hypothetical strength difference between cis athletes and trans athletes.
Yeah.
And what I can say is, like, definitely go and read that. It's really good.
I will.
It's where we are at. It doesn't say anything conclusive because we can't. We don't have enough of a pool of people. What it does say is that we almost don't have any reason to see a change or a difference in strength between cisgender and trans athletes. That can be based off of hormone therapy or morphology, based off of like people pre and post puberty, right?
Mm-hmm. That was actually a topic I wanted to cover with you, Jaxson. So my very shallow knowledge of the topic, because I haven't had to apply it too often. So I have a medical science background, but when you haven't had to apply it for the last 10 years, you lose a little bit.
You don't use it, you lose it.
So, my opinion was always, I don't think anyone has any issues, and I'm going to phrase this really badly, so I'll apologise beforehand. I don't think anyone ever has an issue with a female transitioning into a male category in terms of sport. People just sort of see that as there's no advantageous properties there, so if they want to do that, that's a choice sort of thing as far as they're concerned. All of the controversy seems to come the other way around, and the way I've always sort of viewed it was, if someone has transitioned pre-puberty, there's really no advantage whatsoever. They haven't had any of the benefits of going through a male puberty, the advantageous side of it being, you know, the increased muscular development and so on and so forth. So for me, just from a purely scientific perspective, I wouldn't see that as being advantageous at all. So if they had transitioned before puberty, I don't see why there would be any issue with that person competing as the opposite sex. Post-puberty transitions, that's where it starts to become a bit tricky from my understanding. So because we can't really measure it particularly specifically unless we've measured it pre-transition and then post-transition as well. So the level of advantage would be hugely dependent, wouldn't it, on how that person has transitioned, how their medical transition has gone ahead. Because certain things would have a much more significant effect, certain treatments would have a much more significant effect on reducing their strength than others. Would you say that's relatively accurate?
Yeah, I think you really well summarize where we're at in the argument or discourse around this. It's perfect.
Awesome.
Most of us are getting stuck in this place where we're like, but what about puberty for trans athletes who are female?
Yeah.
And from what I can tell from the research, there's very little change. Like, there's very little difference between a cisgender woman who's trained at the same rate as a transgender woman who's trained at the same rate.
Yeah.
In saying that, though, there's a couple of things that might help to understand that. The first one being that when we look at the guidelines for the Olympics, for powerlifting, most of us, and other federations and other sports, the guidelines say that to compete as a female who's transitioned from male, you must have been in this treatment for 2 years. You must show that over the last, I think it's 12 months, you must show that your estrogen levels have maintained a certain consistency and your testosterone levels must have maintained a certain consistency. And there cannot be any wavering around that.
Yeah.
For you to qualify as a biologically competitive female, let's say. So the guidelines, there are guides around this, you know, that say that should create an adequate and fair playing field for trans women and cis women. And I personally agree with that. And the reason I agree with that is, and this is something that hasn't been quite documented in science at all, but is a consistent and recognized impact of hormone therapy on every transgender person I know, or that, you know, in the community that we've talked about. And that is that at some point in your hormone therapy, given that you're following it properly, you're taking the right dose, you're on the right track, you're being checked by a doctor, you're having consistent blood tests, that your body does shift. So you shift from being a testosterone dominant person, which would shuttle your nutrients into the muscle, into the bone. It would create better outcomes for strength sports. It would help with recovery, yes, for lots of different reasons. You shift from being a testosterone dominant body to an estrogen dominant body. And as an estrogen dominant body, you lose a lot of the receptors and the intermuscular cells that would normally provide those nutrients to the muscle and would normally ship inflammatory products out. Not just that, but every cell on the body becomes estrogen dominant. So that has a receptor for estrogen and it has a receptor for those hormone binding globulins. Your adrenal system changes, your energy system changes, your brain changes, your ability for endurance changes, your upper body strength and muscularity changes, and your bone density changes.
And your
so we go, well, this estrogen dominant person is probably closer to a cisgendered estrogen dominant person.
It's really interesting because the only argument that I can sort of see left, and when I say argument, it's not me vouching for one or the other, but you hear everyone's opinions, what everyone's saying. The last thing would be the argument for muscular maturity and how much of a detrimental effect the estrogen therapy would have on that. As in, is it... That's what I mean, though. You would have to study before, during, and after transition for hundreds of athletes
to have an argument
before we have any idea, really, wouldn't we? Like right now, we're working off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so perfectly said. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of assumptions that are easy to jump to because look, we live in a world where there's a lot of performance enhancement, for instance. So we assume that the same rules apply with performance enhancement as they would as when someone's transitioning, but there's a lot of things that we haven't factored in, partly just because we don't want to do that research. Like at the end of the day,
I'm afraid to ask.
Well, and also if it doesn't affect you, you don't tend to put a lot of effort into it. It's an unfortunate fact of life. Like if this topic hadn't come up and if I hadn't had transgender clients in the past, I probably would know a quarter of what I currently know. And what I currently know is not that much. So it's just kind of, I think, Jaxson's a great ambassador for creating content that helps people move towards a more educated approach to the whole topic. So I just want to say a big thank you. I'm going to stop blabbering now. But I want to say a huge thank you. We really do appreciate you coming on, Jaxson. It's a huge topic and we're grateful that you were able to take so much time to help us understand.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I will just add in one last point. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep tonight because I'm that kind of personality. I'll be thinking about, why did I say that? I'll just go around and around. But like you perfectly put, like where we're at right now with the research as well. Like we just don't have enough trans athletes, and that is not a trans athlete's person's problem. It's that the sports aren't accessible, and we're not creating enough platforms for trans and gender diverse people to compete. And there are so many ways that we can create that. And what we're coming up against is the same thing that we've come up against in every single other system for any minority, is that there is discrimination and there are biases against people like us being in spaces like that and being supported. And so I just think that if we can open the playing field, not only will we as a general community learn more about other people, learn more about ourselves, advance sports medicine in a really great way to understand this kind of biology, advance medical biology in really great ways by studying trans people for trans reasons. Trans people are often studied medically for cisgender reasons. Looking at how long-term estrogen therapy affects bone density. And that's just ridiculous. Like, it's like you were using us like lab rats. That's not information that we can use. We're not getting anything from that.
It's
so
great.
I think
great if it's a
we
side
need to
effect
have more accessible platforms for people that are gender non-conforming to be in the world so that we can learn, discover, evolve, and grow, and do it together.
Yeah. No, that's...
Well, Dak and I will both put it out there. We're happy to work with anyone from the transgender community. So if anyone's looking for a coach, Dak's at Pro Raw Gym. And I'm at...
Thanks for being such amazing allies. It's great.
For the viewers, where can we find you?
So I'm on Instagram, Jaxson Waring, all one word, Jaxson Waring. My business, Luminous Body, we're online as well, luminousbody.co. That's my healthcare practice. And I will shortly be putting up my own website, jacksonwaring.com.
Awesome. If you shoot us through all the details, we'll put it in the YouTube vid. Wherever it actually goes, we don't know.
We'll put it somewhere, like around. Awesome.
You are an absolute legend, Jaxson. Thank you so much for your time today, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again in the future. This has just been way too much fun.
I know, Thank you so much. Thank you.
You guys are the best. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks a lot. All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw today, I know I did. We can
If you like what you see, click here. Subscribe. Subscribe to this.